thank you to the organizers. And I was actually invited on short notice. I was traveling across Zamboanga Peninsula region when I was invited, but I heard that no one from NEDA is going to be available, so I made myself available. And it's nice to be back. It's nice to converse again with my bright former professors. Okay, so my reactions are organized into three parts. First, I would like to contextualize the process in crafting this energy security paper, and also to explain more on how NEDA intends to utilize this, and that's the second part. We plan to use this among many other inputs as guide to sectoral planning. And thirdly, how I, through the NEDA Regional Development Office, which is directly under me, hopes to utilize this, and that is as a guide to regional development and plan implementation monitoring, because incidentally, I'm also chair of the National Program Monitoring Committee. Okay, so I would like to validate the process that was the process involving NEDA, and as explained by Dr. Ravago, this paper became an input to the what was then called Filipino 2040, and which we now call Ambisyon Natin 2040. So it's indeed used as one of the technical papers or inputs to the formulation of that long-term vision. Now the ambition paper is finished, and NEDA is in the advocacy stage, and it's being led by NEDA USEC for Planning and Policy, Rose Idilion. So the usefulness of this energy security paper should not stop there. So that will be used as a guide to sectoral planning along with many other guides, and also as a guide to investment programming and project implementation. But NEDA tries to have a balanced approach as much as possible. And I remember when I was asked to chair the Energy Planning and Policy Development Program Steering Committee, and NEDA was asked to present the emerging strategies in the drafting of the then very rough draft Philippine Development Plan 2017-2022 for the energy sector. And Department of Energy Secretary Cusi reacted unfavorably because of the frequent highlighting of renewable energy strategies. And last night, reading the reactions of some civil society representatives, frequently highlighting the seemingly pushing for coal technology by the paper, particularly in Policy 2 scenario, that reminds me of the need to emphasize a balanced approach. And I believe that there is balance in the formulation of the energy sector strategy in the recently approved Philippine Development Plan 2017-2022. It was approved by the NEDA board last February 20. So let me read to you the specific strategy on optimal policy mix. It says there that an optimal fuel mix policy will be studied based on appropriate allocation of, first, capacities, that is, base load, intermediate, peak and peaking. And second, technologies, that is, renewable energy, nuclear, coal, oil, and gas. So the optimal energy mix policy is expected to address the challenge of securing greater system stability and security of supply to meet power systems demand, as well as to increase the country's system reserve requirement to 25% of peak demand from the current 17%. So note that there's no mention at all of a prescription on the energy mix. And the PDP strategies on renewable energy include this. And it's in that part wherein reducing electricity rates is discussed. So the strategy is formulated this way: encourage renewable energy development in missionary areas to shift away from expensive diesel fuel and reduce universal charge for missionary electrification. So there is that emphasis on renewable energy as on renewable energy technology. Now, as a guide to regional development and plan implementation monitoring, something which I am more closely responsible for. And I note that during these trying times where certain sectors push for alternative facts and make noise, our NEDA Regional Development Office hopes to give the regions a data-driven and evidence-based voice. No, so rather than make noise, we hope to give the regions more voice. And prominent during my visits to the region when examining energy sector issues are the concerns on reliability and affordability. So for reliability, in my visit to Northern Mindanao, although the power there is cheap, 6.4 pesos per kilowatt hour system rate, the big problem is quality of supply or reliability. In the Zamboanga Peninsula region, when I traveled from the west tip to the east tip and visited areas which are on the rise after years of conflict. For example, the 2013 MNLF siege in Zamboanga. No, I personally experienced power interruptions, and the local government units, private sector stakeholders had to switch to diesel-fired generators. And even our NEDA Region 9 office has its own diesel-fired mobile generators. Now on the concern on affordability, in the Western Visayas region, which I also visited, it has the second most expensive electricity rate at 9.9 pesos per kilowatt hour. And actually, this is an issue that's being raised by the NEDA regional directors to me. And hopefully, USEC Rolly and I can converse more deeply about this. Rolly Tungpalan of the USEC for Investment Programming. So it's expensive in other Visayas regions as well. 8.7 pesos per kilowatt hour in Eastern Visayas and 8.5 pesos in Central Visayas. Now, I'm glad to note that affordability is very much highlighted in this paper, and you actually mentioned that the paramount objective in your numerical exercise was to improve the well-being of Filipinos by lowering the price of electricity in an economically efficient manner. Now, given the state of affairs in the region, the NEDA Regional Development Office welcomes this. But given the reactions I read last night, which are so far questioning the numerical exercise, I believe we should proceed with caution. We therefore treat this paper as, and also this roundtable discussion as the start of what I would like to call policy conversations. This reminds me of what Dr. Lianto, Philippine Institute for Development Studies President, and I started in PIDS 2 years ago, regulatory conversations on logistics. So this time, let's have a more meaningful policy conversation on energy sector policy. And in this particular event, on the optimal fuel mix policy. Now, this policy conversation is meant to be dynamic. And USEC Rolly Tungpalan, who supervises the infrastructure staff, is likely to be the appropriate lead for this. But I would like to participate, and I will endeavor to participate. Now, the paper also has corollary recommendations, and those corollary recommendations are what I like more than, than the optimal fuel policy mix. Let me cite two. Reconciling two seemingly contradicting instruments, the EPIRA and the Renewable Energy Law. And then secondly, government investment in transmission highway. On the first, I agree with it. No? And NEDA, I believe the NEDA Secretary Pernia welcomes this, and this forum wherein we would like to pursue this, and the forum wherein we would like to pursue this is through the LEDAC, Legislative Executive Development Advisory Committee. Now, the long list, let me update you, the long list is currently being studied, and the objective of that is to come up with priorities with a shorter list, or although almost all of those items in the legislative agenda are important, but of course we know how the legislative mill works. No, it takes time for bills to be processed in Congress. We will try to come up with a sort of short list. On the second, government investment in transmission highway, I already forwarded my comments to this, to the EPDP some weeks ago. We at NEDA are very much aware that there is that concession agreement with the National Grid Corporation, and this recommendation has to be studied very well, I guess, by the Department of Energy. And we should ensure that in pushing for this, we won't be violating the terms of the contract. Actually, we at NEDA, we're not making any final recommendation or advice on this. And if I may probably advise Sec Pernia, I believe it's better to leave this to the private sector, the investment in transmission highway. But of course, with respect to sub-transmission highway or sub-transmission facilities, which are being used by the electric cooperatives, I believe the government must invest in that. Thank you.